So closing is actually, you'll probably love this because typically when you're doing an owner financing situation, let me just say this, you typically don't need an appraisal. You don't, unless you want to pay your own appraisal. Is you can still write the contract out. The buyer can write the contract out for an appraisal. What I've seen is most buyers don't really opt to have an appraisal. The only reason they have to have one is because they're going through conventional financing, and the banking institution or the lending institution needs to have that appraisal to make sure that the property is worth what they say it's worth, because they use that as collateral to obviously fund the deal. So typically you don't have to wait for an appraisal, or you don't have to go through like final inspections and things of that nature, unless you guys write something where you want to go through get the property inspected so you know what you're getting yourself into, and then that the seller agrees to basically fix certain things in the house. But that's up to your discretion, and every deal is different. So typically there's no appraisals, but they can be. But if they are, they're hired by you. So the appraiser works for you now, and they don't work for any other institution. So you can usually have it back in a quicker turnaround time. Okay, and then inspections is all up to you guys, whether you want to do as is or you do want to do inspections, but you won't have to have a lender inspection, so you won't require certain guidelines. It will be just an agreement between you and the seller for an inspection. So typically you don't have to have that if you're getting into a seller finance deal. And then the only thing, you can close quicker. So if you already have the cash, you can set the date to close whenever you want. It can be in 7 days, 10 days, because at this point it's just running the title search, which is typically 3 to 5 business days, sometimes 7 business days, and then bringing the cash to closing and having the contract there so that the closing agent and the attorney can go through and make sure that the HUD is properly prepared and everything is agreed on, and all the records, all deeds are going to be transferred properly, because you do get the deed to the property. And now the owner does not own that property anymore. They now become the bank. They basically have a lien against that property for the amount that you guys agreed to. All right, so that's the closing. So basically, the contract will look different. So if you are an agent or a broker, you want to make sure. Now I use my own contracts, but you want to make sure that, especially if you're going through like an independent brokerage, you want to make sure that, you have your qualifying broker review your contracts to make sure, or ask them if they have one, to make sure that you're using the right documentation so you can protect yourself and your buyer, and also the seller, okay? You still want to prepare an estimated closing statement so that both buyer and seller understands what each person is going to come to the table with, and so that there won't be any discrepancies. So you want to put those terms into that estimated closing statement. So you want to put the payment, the interest rates, the terms, who's going to pay what in closing. You want to have all that signed by both buyer and the seller so that everybody understands how this deal is going to be structured. Okay, so that's part of the closing. Owner financing isn't a scam. I get a lot of people that when I present this to some owners, they're like, this sounds like a scam. And I'm like, there are so many people that have been doing this for decades, but it's about lack of education, right? Like when people don't know, they're just, people are ignorant to the things that they don't understand, because I didn't think it was felt too good to be true to me as well. But whenever contracts hold a lot of weight, we are in a suing country. I promise you, people will take your butt to court if you fail to perform on the contract, especially when you have them filed through an attorney's office and filed at the courthouse. So I would say don't skip steps. Make sure that you have all your documentations and copies of everything. But no, owner financing is definitely not a scam, and it's a beautiful way to get into home ownership a lot quicker than going through credit repair and doing all these other things. I'm not saying don't go through credit repair, but as you're doing it, you have the right to become a homeowner or an investor and own properties. All right, so in the closing phase, so again, we just closed on our home. We feel good, we're happy. And then now the buyer has missed 3 payments and the seller is starting to freak out. What happens next? Okay, so the first thing I would want to say is when you're, especially if you're getting into this, and why if it's your first one as a realtor, I would suggest you go through a service that's done this before, because they've already had these, what they call risk management procedures in place. You want to go to what they call a debt servicing company. What the debt servicing company now does is they are basically act as a project property manager, essentially. Because normally we make our mortgage payments to a bank when we log in online and we make them. But on this situation, the seller doesn't want to be the person that is handling all the payments and keeping track of that. They can hire a debt servicing company where the buyer will submit their payments, and when they're late, they'll get the notifications, they'll get all the, the letters that were required by that state in order to proceed in what they call like a foreclosure. So what happens is the seller would essentially go through the process of a foreclosure, meaning that they can acquire the property back. And I always tell them, like, in this situation, although they don't want to go through another cycle of selling, but if you were able to get paid once on a house and then you made money in the meantime, and then you have an opportunity to get paid twice on the same house, like, to me, that sounds like a great opportunity. But I get a lot of people are not into real estate like I am, so it doesn't feel the same. But what the debt servicing company does is they go ahead and they start that process for you. And if the buyer did miss those payments, then they will step in and they will start the process to go through the courts and making sure, and then also foreclosing and having the county basically remove the person from the property. And they will also communicate with that person on next steps, so you don't have to. Now, if you go through a company that does this as their business, they're going to have all of that in place for you, and you never have to worry about that part. So I would say, especially if you are a realtor that is representing a seller, you want to make sure that you have that conversation with the seller, because that is the biggest part is, what if they stop paying me? What do I do? And the title is transferred from me. I can't just kick them out or evict them because they're not a renter, they're an owner. So what do I do? And then that is what you do. You want to go to a debt servicing company that handles these type of things, and then they will go through the court process to get them out. And it will still feel the same as a regular foreclosure. It may take months because they have to they have to go through the announcements in the newspapers and all of these great things. And you have the opportunity to put it back on the market, put it up for auction off. You have the opportunity to do a lot of different things as a seller. Other thing that you can do is do a land contract. So that's very popular when you're doing owner financing. So when you do the land contract, basically it says that the title transfer over to this person as long as they're living, which is also great, because if something happened to them and they hadn't finished paying, then the deed would transfer back to you. But the land contract, and we can go into a separate video about this, but what the land contract does is it basically gives the seller some ability to, that if they need to take the property back and acquire it back, they can do so through the courts, because they technically still own the general deed, and the person that's living in there only has the land deed. So if they need to acquire the property back, they don't have to go through a lengthy foreclosure process, right? Because the land contract will stipulate what the contract means, meaning that if they stop paying this, then they have defaulted on that contract, meaning that the deed automatically gets transferred back to me. You do have to go through court. You do have to go through that entire process, but it's a lot quicker and it's a lot smoother than going through a traditional foreclosure process. So we went through the closing. So now we know that first you want to have all the proper contracts in place when you're doing the seller financing. Again, I have contracts where it's specifically for subject to financing, owner financing, laying out the terms, laying out the conditions before we go, and what the earnest money is, and all of that great stuff, what the terms of the loan would be, and what the conditions of selling their property, like any inspections or appraisals if they want to order their own. So it has that in the contract. You want to make sure you have your own and it's approved by your brokerage if you're a realtor. And if you're going to use a company that does this, just ask them for theirs. Just say, I'll write it on yours, and because I want you guys to service this note. Right? And then we went through title. So again, title search, 3 to 5 business days, and you can usually close an owner finance deal within 10 to 15 business days, or in 5 to 7 days if the buyer already has the money readily available. And then default and protection, again, you can go through a debt servicing company and they will handle all this for you. Just like a property management company will handle a tenant, debt servicing company manages the buyer, making sure that they are paying on time. And if there's any late fees that, like if they pay after the time that mortgage was due, they'll assess late fees and all that stuff, okay? Then the other way to do it is to do a land contract. Land contract is probably the most popular way that a lot of people do it, just because it protects the seller, that if the buyer defaults on their agreement on the loan, then the seller can then go to court and take their property back without going through a lengthy foreclosure process, okay? So that is what closing is. So next, I just mentioned it. So sellers would usually ask, well, what if I don't want to hold it for 33 years? What if I kind of want to be done with this, sooner than later. But again, they're somewhat in a distressed state, because we're going to be targeting houses that have been listed on the MLS for an extended period of time, over days on market, or had expired or canceled listings. We're going to be targeting those type of homeowners because yes, they want to sell it, but maybe it's just set on the market so long and they thought maybe now is just not the right time. I'll just have to figure out something later. So what you want to do next is you want to look at exit strategies for your seller. As a good realtor, you always want to provide your seller with the best resources. So if you are able to work them through this deal and get them to say yes and agree to this deal, then let's talk about how they can exit from it. So again, that debt servicing company, all they do is service notes. I don't know if anyone has ever heard of the terminology of a note buyer. So a way to get into real estate and never actually owning any real estate, but still collecting all of the debt that is associated with real estate is called being a note buyer. So that's essentially what banks do, especially if you've ever been approved by a local bank. Like my very first fix and flip, I was approved by a local bank. It was a credit union. And then I got a note within 90 days or so, maybe even less, that my loan had been sold to Wells Fargo. Because that's what they do. The smaller banks will get you underwritten. They usually are very member friendly, but they still have certain guidelines that they have to go under. And it's mainly because they are getting your package ready. They're going to throw you in a pile of several of other homeowners that they carry those loans with. And then they're going to sell it to the big boys, right? Then those big boys are going to package those up into a bigger pile. Then they're going to sell it to the bigger boys. And that's how it all works. Like your loan gets sold throughout it. And that's so these banks, the bigger banks, are essentially note buyers. And so that same concept works on a smaller scale with individual buyers. So if you never want to own a piece of real estate, but you want to collect debt on it, you can be a note buyer. And what that means is if there is a seller that has a buyer in the property and it's stabilized, they've been making payments, but they want their cash out, right? They want the lien that was promised on that property. They want it cashed out and they want to move on, right? They don't want to carry the note for the particular property anymore. Well, there's a note buyer that will come in, evaluate the deal, look at it and see, because they're going to want to know predictability of the person defaulting on a loan. They actually make more money when the person defaults on a loan, but they're going to look at the predictability of if the person would default on that note. And then they have their own algorithms and then they make a decision whether they want to buy the note or not. And so if they buy the note, they basically pay out whatever you have left in payments. So you still get to keep your down payment on properties and all your other payments. They take over, they buy out, sometimes at a percentage, a little like a discounted rate, the amount that's left on the loan, and they cash you out, and then they come into your place. And so now the note buyer is in the seller's place. The seller has their money cashed out, and then the note buyer services that note now, so they bought it out. And what these note buyers also do, they work like small banks. What they do is after they collect a certain amount of notes across the US, then they're going to package it up and they're going to take it to a broker, and a broker is going to then sell it to a big bank. So that's how it all works. So when I hear that it's a scam, the fact that there's a whole entire industry and a whole entire business that is around, especially buying people's notes, like they're like, just explain to them how that process works, so they understand, like, this is not a scam. This is actually a big business. Like, mortgage industry is a huge business not just for the banks, but for savvy investors as well. So I have a question. The question is, why when you refinance, the same mortgage company, they do another title search and charge you? Like, what do they expect to have changed? It could be a lot that actually has changed. So it protects them, because you could have gotten married and added someone to the title. There could be liens on the property, mechanics liens with a tax lien. There could be all kind of things that have changed with the property when you refinance. You can only imagine. There could be a property that is held as collateral, that has loans against it. You might have had another HELOC. Like, it could be a lot of things that's going on with that property. And so they're going to do another title search to make sure that the property is still in what they consider a stabilized condition, so that they can actually lend to or loan that property out. And typically what happens, like if there are some liens or anything, they'll still, if you're doing a refinance, they'll still refinance that, but then they'll require you to satisfy that amount before they refinance it. Because they're gonna want to clear title. Because what happens is, if for some reason they ever have to foreclose on you, if someone is in a position where they can take claim to some of the collateral or the equity is associated with their property, it puts them in a weaker state of collecting their full amount, because they would have loaned you. Let's just say you had $100,000 in equity and they give you a line of credit. Let's just say they gave you 75% of that for $75,000. But then, Joe Smo over here put a mechanics lien on you, or some other type of liens that all come up to $30,000. Well, those people have to get paid usually as well. And so it puts the property in an upside down state now, if they have to pay out more than just them as in first position. I hope that makes sense. I hope you guys have a better understanding of what seller financing is. I want to start tomorrow. We're going to go into another class, and on Friday, I want to make sure that you guys understand how to start looking at some of these deals differently, because the market, just because interest rates are up, the buyers are less on the market because they're buyers that only know, and also realtors that only can help buyers buy one way. When you start to learn how to buy several different ways, then you see that your opportunities really open up. That's why I never get concerned about what the market is doing. I love when more people think it's scary. It's kind of like people that's in stock markets, and I don't, because I don't understand the stock, but people love when people start leaving the stock market, because now it gives them the opportunity to buy and be creative in how they buy those stocks. Same thing with real estate. When people start leaving the market, and now we get to take our pick, we start to get creative in how we can structure deals. Also, check out my link in my bio. If you are a realtor that is looking to learn about this, you want to learn how to work with other individuals in the real estate that can service you, like wholesalers, or work with developers and builders, and how to build those strong buyers for builders and developers, or how to list builders and developers properties. I have an introductory course. It's just like a couple of bucks. Go in there, check it out. And then also stay tuned for my mentorship program, where I'm going to be teaching you guys how to do these deals, how to structure these deals, especially if you're a real estate agent. It'd be very helpful for you guys to understand in this market, so that you do not get away with your listings. And let me add another tidbit. Even if you do any of these deals is not listed on the MLS, you can still obviously add it to the MLS after it closes. Like, you still get your recognitions for your deals closed. All right. So thank you guys. Have an amazing night. And again, DM me if you have any questions. I will do my best to answer you as quick as possible. Have a good night. And with all this being said, if you're looking to reclaim your time, make more money, and lock up more real estate sales, and streamline everything, you need to grab my course on how to make 6 figures in real estate with just one client. This is where I guarantee you that I can help you scale your real estate business. You'll learn the business model, the step-by-step process, and you'll get access to my legal kit and my scripts, email scripts and text messaging scripts. Also, this is everything you'll need to guarantee your growth in the next 90 days. If you don't grow, I'm going to give you your money back. No questions asked. If you're interested, go to the link in the description. This is the same process that I used in order to generate over $80 million in sales for a builder. If you want to take advantage of this opportunity and you want to create generational wealth, all right, no one, and I mean no one, has ever offered this type of course for agents and builders. A course that teaches you how to work with builders, how to work with serial investors, because most agents or even brokers don't even understand this world, and I do. So if you're interested, click the link in the description. If not, I strongly suggest you check out the next 2 videos. They're going to be the videos that YouTube suggests that you watch next. Thank you so much for your time. Talk soon.